The Texas sun had risen on an earth still marked by the events of the previous night. Maverick, the former bull was calmly resting in the freshly cleaned enclosure, the white bandages contrasting with its shiny black skin. Billy, still by his side, still felt on his fingers the warmth of the animal, as a living reminder of the fear they had overcome together. The silence of that morning was not ordinary. It was sacred, a discreet tribute to a miracle that no one had planned. The Williamson Ranch had resumed a slow but constant rhythm. Employees, first suspicious of the wandering boy, now greeted Billy with head nods. Tom and Linda observed all of this with tenderness. The child seemed to have rekindled something old at home, a faith in kindness, in the possibility of reborn. And Maverick, the injured giant, had become the silent guardian of this renaissance. Billy spent his days learning. He fed the calves, cleaned the stables, observed the veterinarian with almost religious attention. Each gesture was a lesson, each animal a chapter. He wrote his own education in silence, far from school benches, but rich in humanity. In the evening, he fell asleep near Maverick, his worn back to pillow, sometimes whispering secrets that only the bull included. But behind this peaceful painting, a rumor was starting to circulate. In the neighboring city, we spoke of an industrial group that came to modernize the region. Men in a suit had been seen at the cafe, asking questions about the ranch. Billy had not yet met them. He did not yet know that this newly acquired peace was going to be threatened by a much more powerful force than the wind or the broken fences. Each morning, even before the sky is completely clearing up, Billy was already standing, barefoot on the fresh earth in the morning. He now knew the sounds of the ranch like a familiar song. The creak of the enclosure barrier, the distant bleat of a sheep, the deep breath of Maverick still asleep. The Taurus, now calm, welcomed Billy with a soft, almost affectionate rumble. A link was woven, indestructible and silent, between them. The days were simple but filled with meaning. Billy helped the care of injured animals, distributed the hay, checked the fences. He learned everything, even to drive a tractor, under the benevolent eye of Tom. The other ranch workers, first skeptical, had quickly caught up for him. He was nicknamed the Little Veterinarian, not for his knowledge, but for this unique way that he had to calm animals without saying a word. With Maverick, the routine was special. Billy cleaned his injuries, changed the bandages, spoke gently, sometimes without really waiting for an answer. He told her about his dreams, his memories, the cold nights under the bridges. Maverick, in return, sometimes put his heavy head against the boy, as if he understood everything. What no adult had been able to do, the bull had done. Listen, this repetitive daily newspaper could have looked commonplace anyone else. But for Billy, it was a revolution. For the first time in his short life, he was neither ignored, inappropriate, nor beaten. He had a place, a task, a living being dependent on him. And in each caress, each look exchanged with Maverick, he found a form of healing. This ranch was not just a place. It was a beginning. It only took a local report, broadcast on a Sunday evening, so that the world discovered the story of Billy and Maverick. The images of the young boy sitting alongside an injured bull had touched thousands of people. In the space of a week, journalists, photographers, and even bloggers were knocking on the door of the Williamson Ranch. Billy, shy and little used to this kind of attention, did not know how to react. Tom, prudent but benevolent, protected the boy from the media tumult. "He is not a show," he said calmly to two insistent cameras. However, he also understood that this notoriety could be used for something. He accepted some interviews, provided that the emphasis was placed on the importance of compassion towards animals, and not on pity towards an abandoned child. Billy, despite his nervousness, found the right words, and each word came from the heart. The neighboring city, formerly indifferent to the fate of the ranch, began to change your tone. School children came to visit. Families brought donations of food and drugs for animals. Some even called the place the Miracle Farm. The name of Billy was circulating in newspapers, on radio, on the internet. It was called the Bull Whisper. This made him blush, but secretly he felt new pride, that of finally existing for good reasons. But this sudden light also attracted shadows. In the discreet meetings of businessmen from the region, the popularity of the ranch became embarrassment. A land so fertile, as well located, with so much attention from the public, could not stay in the hands of simple farmers. La Grande Trade, a giant in the agro-industrial sector, saw an opportunity in gold there. And in its glass offices a plan was started, acquiring the land, regardless of the price. One autumn morning, while the mist still hung on the pastures, a black vehicle with tinted windows was parked in front of the main house of the ranch. 3 men came out, impeccably dressed, their brilliant-edged shoes with the red dust of the Texan earth. Tom observed them from the porch, the frowning. He knew how to recognize the smell of business when she was getting too close to her animals. Visitors quickly introduced themselves. They represented Grand Trade, a company specializing in the production of large-scale meat. Their speech was polite, almost honeyed. They congratulated Tom for the media impact of the ranch, underlined his economic potential, and above all, proposed a huge sum to buy all the property. You could retire, offer your family a comfortable life. Words slipped like honey on a blade. Tom listened in silence, his arms crossed. Then, with the slowness of a man accustomed to weighing his words, he replied, "This land was transmitted to me by my father, and now she gives a boy a second chance. What you buy is not just earth. It's dignity, and it's not for sale." Men exchanged cold looks. One of them released an already ready contract. Tom was ripping it in half without wounding. When Billy learned the visit, he said nothing. He simply went to find Maverick, passed his hand between the horns, and murmured, "They want to keep us away, but we will keep you and me." The bull breathed loudly, as in agreement. That day a choice had been made, that of resisting. But what neither Billy nor Tom still knew is that we do not say no to an empire without consequences. In the weeks following Tom Williamson's refusal, Grand Trade deployed a new strategy to attract public opinion. Advertising panels appeared on the roads leading to the neighboring city. Jobs, growth, modernity, in brilliant letters, accompanied by images of smiling families and automated farms. For those who struggled to reach both ends, the message seemed to be the bearer of hope. A more affable representative, named Mr. Lemoyne, was sent to the region. Former local politician converted into lobbyist, he knew the language of small towns. He presented himself in schools, offered donations to the parish, funded a new baseball field. He was talking about the future of progress to get the county out of his economic torpor. Many began to listen to him. Even some relatives of Williamson's doubted, what if it was a chance? Billy observed all this with distrust. He felt the lie in 2 perfect smiles, the arrogance in the false modesty of these men in costume. He may not have formal education, but the street had taught him to smell the danger. And this danger did not carry claws, but gold cufflinks and well-oiled speeches. He tried to warn Tom, but he seemed worried. He understood that the battle would be larger than expected. Meanwhile, Maverick was a lot. The animal, sensitive to ambient tensions, became nervous with each passage of unknown vehicles. Billy spent more time with him, as if to reassure him, but deaf anxiety settled in the tune of the ranch. It was no longer just a farm. It had become a symbol, and symbols, when they annoy, often end up being crushed or transformed. After the official visit, no direct contact was established between the Grand Trade and the Williamson family. But this silence, instead of bringing calm, announced the storm. Tom knew, from experience, that the silence of the powerful is never synonymous with peace. This is the hushed sound of those who prepare their next maneuvers. He strengthened the fences, checked the papers on the ground, but the concern gnawed at his nights. Billy, meanwhile, felt the atmosphere change around him. The inhabitants of the city, formerly curious and friendly, now avoided its gaze. At the grocery store, conversations interrupted when he entered. We barely greeted him. The local press, previously enthusiastic, no longer talked about the ranch. The boy understood that the Grand Trade, discreetly, bought silences, sowed doubts, and shaped public opinion with golden promises. Linda, usually warm and sweet, became more careful, almost suspicious. She locked the doors earlier, closed the curtains at dusk. Even Maverick, in his enclosure, seemed to feel this withdrawal. He was going in circles, his breath accelerating for no apparent reason. Billy spent hours sitting near him, his hand placed on his warm flank, repeating in a low voice, "They won't have you? They won't have us." And yet, doubt was inserted like dust under a poorly closed door. How long could they resist? Was it reasonable to fight such a large power? But whenever Billy met Maverick's gaze, he remembered why he couldn't flee. This bull accepted it when no one had done. And now it was up to him to protect what they had built, even at the cost of the silence of others. The city's grocery store, usually hosted by light chatter and familiar laughter, had become a theater of fleeting looks and half-words conversations. Billy, who came to seek crushed corn for the hens, felt the whispers behind him like needles in the back. We did not speak hard, but enough for him to hear the keywords: conflict, sabotage, they should sell. An old woman, formerly generous in homemade cookies, looked away when he greeted her. A farmer, whom he had helped to repair a fence a few months earlier, pretended not to recognize him. It was not hatred. It was worse, fear. The fear of mingling with a cause that many already considered lost. Grantrade had managed to infiltrate the spirits without shooting a single shot. Their weapon, doubt. Billy returned to the ranch without saying a word, the bag of corn in the shoulder and a ball in the throat. He sat down near Maverick, as every time the world escaped him. The bull lifted his head, the questioning look, as if he pressed the invisible pain of his friend. Billy murmured, "They think we are crazy to resist, but they have not seen what you are worth." Tom, for his part, tried to collect his allies. He summoned a dinner to the ranch, invited the surrounding farmers, proposed to speak frankly. But on time, only a family appeared. The others had apologies or orders. Silence had become an accomplice. And in this small town, where everyone knew everyone, the fact that nobody said anything spent a lot. Night fell on the ranch like a heavy and threatening curtain. The wind was blowing stronger than usual, lifting the dry dust of the paths and groaning the poorly closed doors. Billy, awakened by a strange feeling, came out of his small room fitted out in the old discount. There was no noise, and that was precisely that troubled him. Even the crickets seemed to have been silent. A crash suddenly broke the silence. Glass. Then a second, heavier noise. A portal that we forced. Billy ran to the Maverick enclosure, his heart drumming in his chest. In the dark, he distinguished 3 hooded silhouettes near the calf stable. They threw buckets of dark liquid on the wooden walls, used oil. The intention was clear, dirty, maybe even a burning. Without thinking, Billy yelled. An animal cry, raw, made of fear and anger. The vandals jumped and fled, leaving behind a trail of oil and knot in the mud. Tom came, rifle by hand, too late to intercept them. But the message was clear. It was no longer a war of opinions. It was a direct intimidation, a warning from those who refused quiet disobedience. That evening, Billy did not sleep. He stayed near Maverick, his hand placed on his side, listening to the slow breath of the bull. The fire had not taken, but the idea had been sown. They were now real danger. However, in this broken silence, a new determination was born. If they wanted to break the link between a boy and an animal, they would have to face a resistance that they had not planned. That of 2 beings united by pain, and more by hope. The next morning, the acrid smell of soiled oil still floated in the air. Ranch workers, discovering the damage, exchanged looks heavy with silence. No word was pronounced, but a heavy tension spread like an invisible mist. Everyone felt that something had changed. It was no longer simply a matter of territory or economic power. It was personal. It was a declaration of war. Linda cleaned the blackish walls of the stable using a cloth and soap, her trembling but determined hands. Tom, on the other hand, called the authorities, although he had little illusions. They will come. Take note. Raise their shoulders. He whispered. He knew that the Grand Trade had too high, too powerful support. Justice did not always go where it was expected. Billy could no longer find peace. Each noise in the night, each light in the distance, revived its vigilance. He didn't want to show it, but fear had slipped into his bones. Even Maverick, usually if serene by his side, seemed more nervous, more reactive. The boy spent long minutes to speak to him, to reassure him, to rebuild the fragile cocoon of confidence that they had woven together. But he felt that a balance had been broken. And in this death-threat atmosphere, loneliness returned like an old companion. The external supports were killed. The cameras had moved away. The curious, the enthusiasts, the self-righteous, all had disappeared in the first sign of real conflict. Billy then understood a cruel but necessary lesson. Those who applaud your courage in full light are not always there to extinguish the fire when night gets climbed. That evening, after everyone was lying, Tom and Linda sit side by side on the old wooden bench in the porch. None of them spoke at first. Only the crickets filled the silence, punctuated from time to time by the slow sighs of Maverick in the distance. Tom stared at the dark as if he was looking for answers in the invisible. Linda, her hands joined on her lap, seemed to carry the weight of a whole world. "Do you think we make the right choice, Tom?" she finally asked, in an almost broken voice. "We put Billy in danger, and the rest of the ranch with it." Tom turned his head slowly to her. He was not a man of great words, but his eyes, tired and full of pain, spoke for him. "This boy gave us a reason to believe in what we are doing here. We can't sell this. You can't betray it." She nodded, even if her heart was worried. They evoked the debts, the costs that mounted, the fertilizers become too expensive, the constant repairs of the fences, and now, the attacks. Tom knew that the ranch has not been profitable for years, but he also knew that the land was worth its price more than its price. It was the soul of their family. Silence fell to each other, not as an abandonment, but as a silent promise, holding to the end. In the sleeping house, Billy woke up with a start, as if he had perceived their concern through the walls. He came out discreetly and saw them there, side by side, gray hair caressed by the wind. He did not dare to disturb them, but by observing them he understood an essential thing. He was no longer alone. This fight, this ranch, this fight against something much bigger than them, he did not have to carry it only on his child's shoulders. Since the night attacks, Billy observed everything with tenfold attention. Each unusual movement, each vehicle unknown on the dusty road, each late delivery, everything triggered an inner radar in it. He had learned to survive by suspicious of the invisible, and his instinct, sharpened by the streets, whispered to him that something was still going on in the shadows. One day, while he was going to drop hay in the goat shelter, he noticed imprints of fresh boots near the barn, wider and deeper than those of the usual workers. He followed them to the southern fence, where one of the wooden posts had been sawn, as intentionally weakened. Billy felt anger ride. It was not a coincidence. Someone sabotage the ranch little by little. He ran to talk to Tom, who listened without interrupting him. When he finished, Tom hugged his teeth, fists closed on the table. "They want to make us crack, Billy. But they are wrong to think that we will fold." Billy nodded. A determined glow burned in his tired eyes. He no longer wanted to be the child who is undergoing. He wanted to act, understand, denounce. That evening he made a silent promise to Maverick. Sitting against the warm flank of the bull, he whispered, "They think no one will protect us. They believe that the silence of others is a green light. But I'm going to prove to them that they are wrong. You will see." And while the night wind caressed the dry herbs of Texas, a plan began to form in the mind of the former homeless boy, a plan to defend what he now considered his earth. The following Monday, 2 official vehicles were garnished in front of the main portal of the ranch. The logo of the Agriculture Department was clearly visible on the doors. 3 men went down, accompanied by a sheriff with a closed look. Tom, the frowning, welcomed them with courtesy but distrust. "Surprised health inspection," said one of the agents. Linda, in the background, felt her heart tighten. The inspection was brutal, almost theatrical. They photographed the smallest details. A slightly rusty trough, a creaky stable door, veterinary drugs not labeled correctly. Nothing was dangerous, nothing threatened animals, but each imperfection was noted, exaggerated. At the end of the morning, a file was filed on the kitchen table. Report on offenses, fines, threats of closure, compliance deadline. Tom fulminated. Linda was trembling. Billy observed in silence. He knew it was not the law they faced. It was a staging orchestrated by those who could not overcome them honestly. Grandtrade had activated its network, and now she used the very rules of the system to slowly stifle the ranch. Not with bulldozers, but with stamps, signatures, official papers. That evening, around an almost silent dinner, Tom declared in a deep voice, "They want us to get tired, that we rush into lawyers and deadlines. But they forgot that we have something they will never have, a reason to fight." Billy looked up at him. It was the first time he saw Tom not as a tired man, but as a captain ready to face the storm. And in this storm, he now knew that he was not a passenger, but a member of the crew. A few days after the inspection, Linda discovered an envelope without stamps or address slipped under the front door. She picked it up, turned her between her hesitant fingers. The paper was yellowed, roughly folded, and wore an upper writing, almost raging. She opened it carefully and read in silence. His hands began to tremble. On paper, in black letters, it was written, "Sell or lose everything. We won't notify you twice." Tom in turn reads hard. He did not show his fear. Not in front of Billy, not in front of Linda, but inside, he felt a cold rage flowing into his veins. It was a psychological war now, a loose and anonymous intimidation. He put the letter in a drawer, but the message remained engraved in the air, like a burned smell that can no longer be ignored. Billy saw the change immediately. Linda closed curtains earlier. Tom kept the rifle loaded near the fireplace. The nights became longer, not because time passed slowly, but because fear prevented sleep from enveloping them. The boy was beginning to understand that this struggle exceeded the boundaries of the ranch. She was now attacking their nerves, their endurance, their hope. But despite fear, Billy felt something new in him, a fierce will. He no longer wanted to survive, he wanted to defend. Not for him, for Maverick, for Tom and Linda, for this piece of land that has become his house. He started writing, simple words, thoughts, truths. He wanted to tell what they lived. And even if no one was listening to him yet, he knew that one day, these words would have a weight larger than all threats in the world. As the tensions grew around the Williamson Ranch, the eyes turned to the town hall. The municipal council, made up of 8 members from the local community, found itself at the center of a burning debate. On the one hand, those who saw in the Grandtrade project an unexpected economic opportunity. On the other, those who, although minority, believed that giving in to meant betraying the soul of the city. The meetings became more and more stormy. The words employment, modernization, and reconstruction were brandished as talismans. But faced with them, a lower but more sincere voice spoke of roots, memory, respect for the living. Some members, formerly neutral, began to question themselves. Billy's face, seen on television, his tender gestures towards Maverick, it remained in minds as a difficult to ignore. In the town hall corridors, we heard rumors. Envelopes slipped under doors, subsidy offers for local projects, dinners with representatives of the Grandtrade. The influence ramp, seduced, poisoned. But she had not yet won everything. A courageous voice, that of Madame Rivera, a retired teacher and municipal councilor, took a public position. If we sell this ranch, we also sell our conscience. Billy learned the new one by an old radio station hanging in the workshop. He clenched his fists, his heart beating. It was no longer just their fight. Others were starting to get up. The boy felt a spark of hope. Maybe this war was not lost. Perhaps the true stories, those which are born from the heart and the earth, could still influence decisions. And maybe, just maybe, that the powerful could vacillate. It was a hot, stifling night, where even the wind seemed to hold back its breath. Billy fell asleep near Maverick, his faithful companion, when howls suddenly tearing the silence. Calves. Linda was screaming from the house. Tom had already grabbed his rifle and ran towards the enclosure, while orange flames danced in darkness like demons released in the night. The fire had taken in the straw freshly placed at the foot of the Grange de Putti. The frightened calves beaten with terror, some hitting the barriers in a desperate attempt to flee. Without thinking, Billy plunged into smoke, his t-shirt tied around the face. He opened the gates one by one, guiding the animals outside with safe gestures, sweet words, even in the middle of chaos. The fire already licked the beams above his head. With the help of Tom and 2 workers alerted in an emergency, they managed to contain the fire before it spread to the main buildings. The soil was still smoking, the calves praised, but none had died. Billy, his face blackened, with his flashes, held against him a small white calf spotted with soot. He was trembling, but his eyes shone with a more powerful flame than the one they had just combated. The rage to protect. The next day, the firefighters spoke of an accidental incident, but no one believed in this version. Tom found leftover tissue soaked in oil not far from the home. The Grand Trade had not only crossed a line, it had reduced it to ashes. Billy, however, does not flex. He looked at the ruins with a renewed determination. They want to burn what we like to abandon, but I will rebuild until they run out. 2 days after the fire, while the ranch still held its wounds, a cry of distress sounds from the main enclosure. Billy let go of his wheelbarrow and ran. What he saw him froze his blood. Maverick was lying, breathless, an open wound on the left side, just above the old scar. The ground was stained with blood, and the fence had been cut, voluntarily, in the very place that Billy had reported a few weeks before. The bull, despite his impressive mass, seemed vulnerable like never before. He knocked down weakly, his supplicant eyes looking for those of Billy. The boy fell on his knees, her hand trembling, calling Tom with full lungs. Linda came with water, and the county veterinarian, warned in an emergency, arrived 2 hours later. "It is not an accident," he said, examining the traces left in the mud. "We attracted him, injured and abandoned there." Billy stayed with Maverick overnight, making sure that he didn't fall asleep too deep. He cleaned the wound gently, whispered reassuring words, and felt a dull pain for him. That of seeing, once again, innocence injured by cowardice. It was not just an animal. He was his soul brother, and we had just hit him where it would hurt. But in this ordeal, an unexpected force emerged. The images of the injured bull, relayed by compassionate neighbors, went around social networks. The return of the saboteurs, titled a small local newspaper. The indignation spread slowly, and while Maverick was fighting to get up, Billy was already standing, more determined than ever. "They won't have me, Maverick. And either. We're going to hold on. For all those that are representing." Sitting in the old barn, surrounded by rusty tools and hay smells, Billy opened a yellowed notebook, offered by Linda a few weeks ago. There had only been scraps so far, flying thoughts, confused memories. But that night, after watching Maverick, he felt the irrepressible need to write. Not to remember, but to resist. Each word lying on paper became a stone in the foundation of its truth. He wrote on injustice, on fear, on courage too. He described Maverick's gaze when the pain crossed him, the hands of Tom damaged by the years of work, the silent tenderness of Linda when she pushed a whole hole. He spoke of fire, threats, heavy silences in the grocery store, and the silent cry of those who had never had a voice. His words were not perfect, but they vibrated with raw sincerity. On Linda's advice, he published a first online text. He was expecting anything, but in less than 24 hours, the divisions multiplied. Comments flocked. Former children placed, isolated farmers, veterinarians, even teachers, all greeted his courage, his lucidity, his gift of transforming pain into appeal to hope. Some said, "You made me want to fight." Billy discovered another type of power that day, a power that did not come from fists or money, but from the heart. He understood that words could dig tunnels in the thickest walls, and that perhaps through this story he was not only fighting for his ranch, but for all those who had tried to silence. And he swore by turning the page to continue writing. It was Linda who had the idea. One morning, when Billy was about to feed the hens, she stopped him, an old digital camera in her hands. "What you write, Billy? It's beautiful, but they have to see you. Let them hear your voice." The boy hesitated. He didn't like to show himself. Too long, he had been invisible or looked at contempt. But something had changed in him. He wanted us to know. So he accepted. They sit under the old oak, the one near the well with Maverick in the background, bandaged but standing. The camera was shaking a little, but the image was clear. Billy looked right in the goal and spoke. From what the ranch was. Of the injury of Maverick. Threats. Of the love he had discovered here. He did not beg. He did not complain. He simply told with such a naked truth that she became overwhelming. The video was posted on social networks by the daughter of one of the workers. She exploded. In 3 days, she had exceeded 100,000 views. Regional channels talked about it. Then nationals. "The Boy and the Bull," we headlined. Tears in Billy's eyes, dignity in his voice, and especially this sentence. "You should never have to choose between your house and your conscience." This sentence became a slogan. She appeared on signs, posters, T-shirts. Donations flocked. Messages of support, legal aid proposals, petitions signed by thousands of people. The fight changed dimension. Grand Trade, hitherto quiet in his silent advance, found himself in the spotlight. And Billy, who had never had a voice, now became the spokesperson for a fight much greater than him. A fight for the soul of the earth. The echo of Billy's video exceeded the borders of Texas. In the calm of an agricultural university north of the state, a professor in animal ethics, affected by the sincerity of the young boy, decided to contact. She sent a simple message. "You are not alone. What you defend is just. We want to help you." A few days later, she arrived at the ranch with 3 students, brochures, and new energy. Alongside them, a lawyer specializing in land rights, formerly engaged against industry abuses, offered his services for free. He was known not to go back to the giants. He studied documents, threat letters, inspection reports, and declared, "What they do is illegal. They were counting on your isolation. But now you are visible, and we are going to retaliate." Even among the ancient enemies, some faces changed. A municipal councilor who supported the sale returned to his position publicly. A worker of the neighboring factory, employed by a subsidiary of Grand Trade, delivered evidence of clandestine actions. It was a shock for many. It was discovered that sabotage had been organized, coordinated intimidation. The smooth facade of society was fled. For Billy, each new support was like an outstretched hand that he had never known before. He, who had slept in alleys, who was not waiting for anything anymore, discovered that sometimes miracles do not come alone, but in chain. The fight was not over. But for the first time, he no longer felt a child against a world. He felt a voice in a choir, and that changed everything. When Billy's video was taken over by a national news channel, a team of investigative journalists was dispatched to the region, directed by an experienced reporter named Elise Dumas. Known for her tenacity in the face of abusive power, the team settled at the neighboring town of the city, determined to shed light on Grand Trade methods. Elise began by questioning the inhabitants. Many at first refused to speak. Too much fear, too much unsaid. But little by little, the languages are distinguished. A cashier admitted to having seen envelopes exchanged between a municipal councilor and a man in costume. A mechanic said that a trucker asked him how to discreetly sabotage a water pump. The evidence, first thin, accumulated like a storm in training. The report, entitled Ranch Under Pressure, When the Powerful Want the Earth of the Humble, was broadcast in prime time. We saw Billy's face, Tom's heavy silence, Maverick's suffering, but especially the pieces of the puzzle of an insidious corruption system. Grand Trade was questioned. Their press service tried to deny, divert, silence. But public opinion was already in turmoil. Billy looked at the seated report between Tom and Linda in the small ranch lounge. He said nothing, but his hands hugged the armrests with an almost painful intensity. When his face appeared on the screen, with his simple and raw words, Tom put a hand on his shoulder. Linda wiped a tear. That evening, Billy understood that his past injuries had not been in vain. They had prepared him to become the witness of a fight that others did not dare to fight. Following Elise Dumas' report, Grantrade's smooth and polished facade began to crack publicly. Their communication service, accustomed to controlling the story, was overwhelmed by the waves of reactions. Former employees, previously silent, began to testify under the guise of anonymity. They spoke of closed-door meetings, pressure tactics, neutralization projects for recalcitrant properties like that of Williamson. Internal documents were disclosed. Systematic purchase plans of neighboring land, sheets on influential members of the municipal council, budgets intended for discretionary expenses. The press grabbed it, the television channels relayed the revelations in loop. The words blackmail, corruption, and even threats against minor appeared in the titles. Grantrade lost in a few days what she had taken years to build, her credibility. The president of the company attempts a public declaration. Dark costume, measured voice, he spoke of isolated acts, local drifts, while denying any involvement of management. But it was too late. The image of little Billy holding Maverick's head in his arms during the report, contrasting too strongly with the coldness of corporate speech. The public had chosen his camp, and this camp was that of the earth, the justice, and the child without a home that has become a symbol of resistance. Billy, however, did not celebrate. He observed all this with new severity. He knew that the enemy, even weakened, could still strike. But he also knew an essential thing. When the truth comes out of the shadows, she no longer returns to silence. And this truth had brought it to arm, through mud, fire, and fear. Now it belonged to all those who still wanted to believe in what is right on this earth. The announcement arrived a clear morning. A public hearing would be organized in 15 days to officially rule on the future of the Williamson Ranch. The municipality, under pressure from opinion, media, and new legal evidence, could no longer ignore the case. It would be an opportunity for all parties to present their arguments. But for Billy, it was not a simple formality. It was the moment of truth. Tom summoned a meeting in the old barn. Linda, the volunteer lawyer, a few Solidarity neighbors, and the committed young students came to sit around an improvised table. They established a strategy. Evidence, testimonies, satellite images of degradations. Everything would be shown. But Billy wanted to speak. Not as a witness, as a soul of the place, like the one who had felt this earth beat under his feet, even when nobody thought about it anymore. The nights that followed were devoted to writing. Billy, helped by Linda and by Elise Dumas herself, wrote a speech. He learned it by heart, changed it, reread it in Maverick in a low voice. The bull, still bandaged but stable, listened to him calmly, as if he understood that each word would be a stroke not against a business, but against injustice. Meanwhile, Grantrade also reinforced his line of defense. Dreaded lawyers, economic experts, employment figures, investment promises. They were preparing to make up everything in common good. But what they did not understand yet is that this time it would not be a matter of figures. It would be a matter of voice, memory, and heart. They arrived the day before the hearing, in a black sedan with tinted windows, like sent from another world. For lawyers, ironed costumes, leather-attached causes, frozen smiles. Their looks roamed the municipal hall with the ease of those who have already won 1,000 battles before they even started. At their head, Maitre Conrad Ralston, feared in legal circles for his ability to return any cause in favor of his customers, regardless of the truth. Conrad held a thick file in his hands, filled with graphics, investment cards, economic forecasts. He spoke with calm, almost charming, approaching the municipal councilors. Our project is not intended to destroy, but to modernize, he said. He mentioned hundreds of jobs, renovated roads, subsidies for local schools. Listening to him, Grantrade seemed to be a blessing from heaven. But in the shadow of the corridor, Billy observed. He recognized this kind of speech. He had heard dozens of times in homes, among social workers, among those who promised to get rid of. Behind the figures there was no soul, no animals, no earth, no sacred silence in the early morning. Just profit columns and root without roots. He then understood that the most powerful weapon of grand trade was not the money, it was indifference. That evening at the ranch the atmosphere was tense. Tom was preparing his documents. Linda was rereading the declarations of witnesses. But it was towards Billy that all eyes turned at some point. He, the youngest, the most apparently fragile, bore the weight of history in his hands. And when he got up to repeat his speech one last time, one thing became clear. Tomorrow, in this room, they would not be dealing with a child, but with an awakened conscience. The day before the hearing, a special silence reigned over the ranch. Not that of fear, nor of fatigue. It was a silence of concentration, almost sacred. Billy was isolated under the old oak, the same one he had shot the video that has become viral. Sitting on a strain, the notebook in hand, he reread each sentence of his speech, in a low voice. He sometimes rushed, scratched, corrected, but did not flee. Linda watched him from afar, her arms crossed on her chest, her heart knocked. Tom remained near the barrier, fixing the horizon as if to contain the weight of the moment. Maverick, lying in the shade, breathed slowly, appeased, half-closed eyes. He also seemed to listen to like a living statue that watched over his boy. Billy, with each word pronounced, seemed to straighten a little more, as if his spine was forged sentence after sentence. He recited simple but powerful truths. He spoke of the first night in the stable, from the wounded Maverick's gaze, how a place can save a life without saying a word. He said, "It's not just one piece of land. It's a home, a heartbeat. This is a place where I learned that I was worth something." Each word vibrated like a tense thread between him and the world. At the end, he got up, closed the notebook and looked up towards the darkened sky. The wind had risen, lukewarm and loaded with promises. He inspired deeply, then turned to Tom and Linda. "I'm ready." And in his voice, there was neither bravado nor fear. There was something stronger, the quiet certainty of defending what deserves to be, even if one is alone. On the morning of the hearing, the municipal hall had never been so full. The wooden benches crumbled under the weight of the inhabitants who came in number. Some were curious, others committed, some still undecided. Journalists had installed their cameras in the back, and the municipal councilors, aligned in silence, leafed through their files while waiting for the start. The atmosphere was electric, suspended between waiting and tension. Billy entered between Tom and Linda. He wore a clean shirt, slightly too large for him, and held his notebook against his chest like a talisman. In his way, a few heads looked. Glass encouraged him in silence. Others evaluated it coldly. Faced with him, Grand Trade's legal team was impassive, like a wall of elegance and strategy. But in this sea of neutrality, a detail made all the difference. Billy was there to tell the truth, not to sell it. The mayor, visibly uncomfortable, opened the session with a hesitant voice. He recalled the issues, gave the words to the parties, and announced that everyone would have 15 minutes. Grand Trade's lawyer was the first. He spoke of figures, economic stability, innovation. His tone was smooth, mastered, almost hypnotic. He mentioned radiant avenirs, lasting investments, hundreds. But in the room, a shudder was felt. And humans and beasts, and the earth itself, where were they in all this? Then it was Billy's turn. He got up, walked slowly to the desk, and put his notebook. He looked up, inspired, and silence was total. Not a noise, not a breath. The boy without a house, without name in the past, was now going to speak in front of those who wanted to erase him. And no one could stop it anymore. Billy put her two hands on the edge of the desk. He first looked at his notes, then slowly looked up at the assembly. He does not read. He spoke. Her voice, first hesitant, quickly found an overwhelming accuracy. "I was not born here. I am not the son of a farmer. But this is where I learned what the word family means. Respect. Earth. Not in papers. Not in speeches. In the silences, in looks, in the way an animal trusts you when no one does. A thrill crossed the room. Billy continued, with a tight throat but his voice firm. He told the first night in the stable, the blood of Maverick, his own fear of an abandoned child. He spoke of the flame, smoke, of those who had tried to scare them. But above all, he spoke of the earth. It is not a commodity. It is not a good to exchange for promises. It's a memory. It's a chance for people like me to become someone. He stopped for a moment. We could have heard a pin fall. Even the lawyers of Grand Trade, for a moment, stopped scribbling. Billy concludes, if you give this earth to those who wanted to turn it off, then what you kill is not a ranch. This is a possibility. That of believing that you can belong to a place, even when you come from nowhere. He went slowly, his eyes straight, his heart beating like an old drum. A long second flowed, then a hand struck, then another, and suddenly the whole room got up. Not by obligation, out of conviction. The applause was not noisy. He was heavy, serious, respectful. It was a tribute. Tom wiped his eyes on the back of his hand. Linda hugged Billy's hand. And something, at this precise moment, changed in the air. Fear dropped. Hope had just gotten up. The mayor, visibly shaken by Billy's speech, asked a break before the final vote. The room was temporarily emptied. The members of the council remained alone in camera, while the outside of the town hall burst out. The faces were tense. Some prayed in silence. Others chatted with animation, summarizing the boy's words as if they wore a sacred weight. Even journalists, usually distant, seemed moved. Inside, the debate was intense. 2 members were still firmly acquired in Grand Trade, citing economic promises, subsidies, contracts already sketched. But in front of them, others raised their voice to speak of dignity, collective memory, justice. And above all, they mentioned moral responsibility for not betraying what had been revealed in broad daylight. The truth of a homeless boy who has become aware of a city. When the doors reopened, instant silence fell on the crowd. The mayor settled, his face marked. He scraped his throat and read the decision. After deliberation and majority, the Coldridge Municipal Council voted against the sale of the Williamson Ranch to the Grand Trade Company. The site will be protected as a historic and community agricultural property. A whisper rose, then a cry of relief, followed by applause and even crying. Billy was frozen for a few seconds, as if his ears refused to believe it. Then Tom put a firm hand on his shoulder. It's done, son. You did it. Linda hugged him, eyes flooded with tears. At the bottom of the room, even some former adversaries raised themselves in silence, as if to salute not a victory against a company, but the victory of a human heart over the cold logic of profit. The day after the verdict, the ranch awakened in a different light. The sun seemed softer, lighter air. However, nothing had really changed. The fences were always to be repaired, the animals to feed, the dust to sweep. But in every everyday gesture, there was now a silent conviction. They had regained possession of their own history, and that changed everything. Billy walks alone to the Maverick enclosure. The bull, although it was weakened, slowly straightened up to his sight, as if he felt that something had changed. The boy approached, put his forehead against that of the animal, and murmured, "We are still there, and no one is going to hunt us anymore." The warm breath of the bull in response was like a shared promise. 2 survivors, 2 fighters, 2 souls repaired by the earth. Around the ranch, wildflowers had started to push, some in the very footsteps of the fire. Linda, by discovering them, saw a symbol there. Life always pushes back, even on ashes. She picked one and placed it in a small vase on the kitchen table. Tom, for his part, redrawn the extension plans of the estate, dreaming of a children's reception center and an animal care space. The past had given them a cause. The future now offered them a meaning. And Billy, in the tranquility of the evening, opened his notebook once again. He wrote, "We wanted to make us disappear, but we bloomed." These simple words wore the imprint of everything he had gone through. Fire, fear, rejection. but also tenderness found hope sown like wheat. In each line of its history, there was now a deep root, and in each root, the promise of a new flowering. The weeks following the verdict were filled with active calm, as a found breathing. The ranch was no longer content to survive. It was rebuilt. With the help of volunteers from the whole state, the fences were straightened, the barns reinforced, and a space specially fitted out to accommodate children in difficulty. What had been a refuge for a single boy gradually became a sanctuary for others. Billy was no longer simply the boy of the bull. It had become a living symbol of resilience, truth, and change. Journalists continued to come, but this time he was no longer talking about what he had lost. He was talking about what he wanted to build. He said, "If a place could save me, then he can also save others." And behind him, Maverick, majestic and peaceful, always watched, like a silent goalkeeper. Tom, for his part, had left Billy a plot of land to cultivate. "So that you feel that it is also yours," he said simply. The boy was passionate about it, first planting medicinal herbs, then a few vegetables. Each shoot was becoming an act of faith in the future for him. He no longer needed to flee, to finally belong to a place. And more, this place grew with him. One day, looking at the sunset, spread over the fields, Billy said to Linda, "Before, I thought that life was something that happened to you. Now I know that's something you can grow." She smiled gently to him, her heart swollen with tenderness. He was no longer the wandering boy that they had found near the enclosure. He had become a building builder. 6 months after the hearing, a new plate was fixed at the entrance to the estate, engraved in walnut wood. "Ranch Hope, where the earth heals hearts." This name, proposed by Billy himself, was born of a deep desire that the place keeps in mind what he had represented, not only for him, but for all those who would then come. Because now, the ranch was no longer a simple home. It was a living symbol of Renaissance. The children of the center came from all over the state. Some had never touched an animal, others wore invisible scars, such as Billy in the past. Here, they discovered the benevolent silence of the hills, the quiet strength of the animals, and above all, of the adults who looked at them not with mercy, but with faith. Maverick, which has become legendary, was approached by the most shy, putting his head on their shoulders as if he recognized in them familiar injuries. Tom and Linda had decided to gradually transmit the reins of the ranch to Billy, not by charity but out of conviction. "You know how to listen to the earth better than anyone," said Tom, entrusting him with the keys to the old hangar. Billy accepted with silent humility, aware that what he had received far exceeded the property. He had received an inheritance of love, patience, and confidence, and he intended to transmit it. On a spring afternoon, Billy sat under the old oak, surrounded by laughter of children and the light rustle of high herbs. He opened his notebook, added a last sentence. "I was a lost boy, the earth found me, and together we learned to cure." And in this vibrant silence, full of life, the ranch aspirants continued to flower, for those who still believe that even pain can become seed.